So let's look at some of the applications of form design, right? So that is more easier to understand, right? So if you see shopping offline, you go to a supermarket, you choose whatever you want to buy, and then you put it into the cart and then you buy it. Same way in a digital context, what you are doing is you are using Mintra, in which you are selecting something, you are putting it under your basket and you are buying it. The action is there, right? Output is okay, so your order is placed, you are going to get the packages at your home. So that's a form design. So what you are doing is physical to digital. This is how it's working. Now let's look at the other example. So any registration forms, right, in which you need to put a lot of your details, dates, all those things, signatures and everything, right? Offline you do it that way, but online you are doing the same thing. You're writing your name, you're writing your identifier, you're writing your key that is there, and then you're registering. Same thing, right? Opening an account, you used to do it offline, you can also do it online. You're giving the data, it is getting there, and you have the access to the bank account now. The other thing, of course, is you must have seen these long forms, right? In paper you used to do a lot of forms. So maybe you are applying for an exam or anything, right? So you used to do it by your pens and everything. That was a form there when we used to, learn and teach in schools and colleges. Now data input online, right? You are doing the same thing. You are entering some input. You are letting it be saved in certain, database somewhere so that the other person can access it to provide you some services. So if you look at customer inputs offline versus online, so the advocacy part, right? So the way you provide feedback, right? So you say, okay, khana mast tha, maza aaya, all those things. Same thing you are doing with, digital forms here. You are saying, okay, how would you rate the, support, onboarding, or whatever experience that was there? So good, bad, what's the main reason, and all those things. So yes, everything that we have been doing in a physical space, I mean, some context of it is done in the, digital space by doing all these different kinds of form design. Logical organization and grouping, right? So we'll do some exercises to actually understand what it means. How do you logically organize and group things, right? So these are the 7 steps with which you can do it. First, if you see, group and order the elements logically, right? Making sure each categorization or organization has a particular intention or a goal. And we'll be looking at the one exercise there. The other step is plan for how will someone access the information, right? So if I'm saying that I have to enter the name, so what is the intention? Why does somebody need my name, right? So, and the intention is to identify me by my name. That's the intention. That's why they need my name there. Why do they need the password? So that, okay, they can allow you to access the resources or services by verifying whether you are using that service or not. So you use password. So that is basically the intention. The third step is plan which of the answers you can infer, right? And which of the answers do you absolutely need? So there are some part of the answers that can be automated, and there are some part of answers that cannot be. So you'll have to enter them there. So that is the third point. Now the fourth point is identify the elements that are mandatory and not mandatory. So for example, if you are, let's say, applying for passport, then you can say your mandatory details are, yeah, you of course need name, you need the age, you need the email ID and everything. But the optional things can be your secondary phone number and all those things. So you'll have to identify for your context what is mandatory. For me, what I cannot compromise and what can I, make optional. And then write key goals for all the organization and grouping that you are doing. Write key goals for that so that you are able to plan the elements for that intention. The other one is plan which form element would you use, right? So for example, if you want to take the name, what will you use? Will that be a drop down? Will that be a text area? Would that be a text field? Right? So based on your evaluation technique, you'll have to identify that. And the last thing is plan for errors. You can make a lot of mistakes when you are filling certain form. You should be able to identify when you are designing that what are all the areas in which a user can make mistakes so that I can plan for it and I can help them, right? And if you are able to do all these 7 steps in form design, you are in a good shape, right, to get started with the design part, right? So this is the planning part. So the step 1 is logical grouping, right? So quick exercise for all of you. Here are the different fields that are there. Now let us know how will you group them, spend maybe 30 to 40 seconds and see what are different categories that are forming up out of these information. So based on the context, you can mix and match the combinations, right? So I'll give you the example. I mean, I'll reveal the example for you. So it is based on the context. If you want to use email for only contact purposes, you will put that under contact information. But here, what you are saying is here, if you see on the right side, the example that is there is clear cut intentions for the three different sections. So anything that comes under the personal information is to just collect your personal information, right? To know you, right? That is the intention there. Anything that comes under account information is actually to manage your account. What are all the important things that are needed to manage your account so that you can maybe recover it later? It is, acting as an identifier for you. That's why you're making sure that you are entering the email 2 times, password 2 times. You're choosing the security question. We are establishing the fact that, okay, these are the information which are very necessary for me to have an account. And then the contact information, which is, okay, you can contact through the address, you can contact through the phone number. So the step two is you need to plan for how will someone access the information, right? So here is an example. You need to design a form to collect details about an employee for their registration in a company. Below are few examples of the information that you would need to collect. So name, gender, date of birth, current address, permanent address, photo and signature, identity proof, and PAN card. So now, why do they need this information? Why do they need current address and permanent address both? Demographic. Okay. So why do they need current address and permanent address both? So, but also in the emergency context, if you say that, okay, current address, they are not available, okay, we have the other address too. By doing this exercise, what we are trying to do is we are trying to understand, okay, even before starting to design, we are trying to understand, okay, if I have to give the name, why will they use it, right? What is the context? What is the intention? And that is very, very important, even before trying to start a form design, right? So these are all the cases that are there. The next step is minimizing the effort. So we talked about a lot of examples in which we have huge forms, right? Now look at this example on the left. What's going on? See, by doing those two things, providing suggestions and then autofilling all the relevant fields that are there, you're minimizing the effort. So the company address is inferred, right? Minimizing the effort for the user in this context. So when you are designing, it's also very, very important for you to identify all the areas in which you can actually infer the information from the user and make their lives very, very easy. So I'll just give you the context you're applying for. I mean, you're registering for the employment for a particular organization. So imagine the context, right? So you have already applied there, applied for a job, you got the job. So now you're registering your employment there. Now my question is, how can you minimize the effort here in these fields that are here, right? What is the information that you can infer? I think I would agree the main things are current address and permanent address. And because when I, gave you the context, I also told that the person has already applied and got the job. So they will have some information about that person in their database. So which is the name? They will for sure know the name. When you, allow someone to, register to your ecosystem, you provide them a customized link, right? So by which we can say, okay, name can also be inferred. Otherwise not, that's also fine. But yes, current address and permanent address you can infer, because from pin code you can automate certain part of it, and then you can put the control in which you can say, okay, my both the addresses are same, right? So that is how you can minimize the effort of the user wherever possible, considering your constraints, right? So if you have the ability and the engineering team which can actually make the PAN card scannable and fetch the name, gender, date of birth and everything, that's also one of the ways. And if you are a banking, right, you can also get the data if you have the permissions. Step 4, if you see, is identify the elements that are mandatory and not mandatory, right? So when to use mandatory symbol? Whenever it is very, very important for you to add certain information that if you don't add, you cannot move forward to the next step is mandatory. So in this case, what the design is saying, okay, first name, last name, address, and all those things, right? But you should be able to clearly differentiate, and you'll be able to do that only when you follow the step 2, right? Which is knowing the intention of the information that you want to collect. Let's do some fun exercise. Here are two choices, left and right. Choose the best way of representing mandatory fields in a form and also give your reasoning why. How many left? How many right? You can apply different things, right? So when you want to apply the left one, you have to make sure that there is no confusion that what does the asterisk mean. So you need to explain, okay, asterisk means the fields are required, right? So you are removing that con from there, right? But if you say that no, a lot of audience from who uses my application, it's fine if you just setting the expectation on the top. That is also fine, right? But you'll need to plan for the edge case. So what if a mandatory field gets skipped, right? So yeah, I'll not put right or wrong to any one of those. It's just that different context will be there, and you'll still need to plan for the cons that you are saying. But always the best practice for the larger audiences, you do, if it is everything is important, you don't put a star everywhere. You just set the expectation on the top, but make it noticeable enough so that nobody misses it. And then you plan for the, what if they miss it, right? But yeah, you can argue both the ways by doing the pros and cons. Now let's do another exercise. So now my question here is, now you have these two different examples here. Which one will you choose, left or right? Make a choice. Okay, so let me give you this context, right? So in previous example, what did we discuss? If we are going to choose the one which is on the left now, which is you are specifying on the top, the converse users might forget, so they will miss some of the fields, but they can still click the sign up button, right? So fields are mandatory, but they can go to the next step, and the mandatory fields will not be taken. I mean, the information for the mandatory fields will not be taken. Now which design will you go with? Compare the pros and cons, right? So in left, you are setting the expectation clearly. You might forget all fields are mandatory. You might make mistake and click on the sign. That's the con. Is that con applicable to the right one? In any case, until you fill the all the fields that are there, you cannot get that enabled. So the con is not there. But the other con is there that you don't know what fields are mandatory. Then doesn't matter. Your button is still not disabled. So fill everything until unless it gets enabled, right? So still, I mean, now which is the better choice? So according to the context, if it is very important for you to make sure that the other person is not making mistakes, they are entering everything, it's a good way, right? The con is, okay, so the button is disabled, they do not know why is it not disabled, so provide context. But if you see the impact on the left, it is impact is very very high that you will make mistakes, and then once the mistake is happened, then you are reminded, array, you made a mistake. Here you are not, I mean, the system is not even letting you make the mistake, so there is no impact. So that's how you evaluate designs, right? In some cases this will be applicable, in some cases this will be applicable. The next question is now, so what if there are too many optional fields? Which pattern will you choose and why? So assuming that there are mandatory fields and there are optional fields, and there are more optional fields than the mandatory ones. Now, which one will you apply? The left one has the psychological advantage, while as the right one is clear cut, right? In which you are saying, okay, if less number are mandatory, why? I mean, making it minimal, right? So focusing on the important thing, right? And impact on both the things, the impact is, that, okay, you will fill that, you'll know about it, and, you'll be able to do the same, right? So one pro here, one pro there. Now, how will we choose? Will we go with the psychological advantage, or will we go with the focus? So yes, you can argue in a lot of different ways, but yes, always you'll have to make a choice, because there will be, different aspects to it, different pros and different cons. So it's always, again, no right answer, but always something you have to recommend one over the other. Step 5 is write key goals, right? So the context, again, anchoring back the context is you need to design a form to collect details about an employee for their registration in a company, right? Okay, so the second line we can avoid, but yeah, that is the context. So what will be the metrics you will aim to achieve, right? That's the other question. If you are trying to, write goals, I'll give you a simple example. So when you are, I think you must have also seen that example if you have attended any of the Rockstar UX Designer Challenge, in which we compare two different contexts for entering date of birth, right? So one context is you're applying for your passport. So now you want to pick the date of birth. I mean, you want to enter the date of birth, which pattern will you use? And the other context is if you are, let's say, you are just checking your horoscope, right? For which you need a date of birth. What kind of widget will you choose? So, but even before choosing the widget, the other question, I mean, the other thing that is you have to think about is what is the metric. So, for example, if you are applying the passport, if you say speed is not your metric, you don't want to complete it faster, but even before that, what is important is that you enter your information without any mistakes. So accuracy takes the precedence over the speed, right? Because that is one thing, in one single time you'll apply for it and you'll get your passport. But on the other side, if you look at the horoscope, you are checking your horoscope, right? You are entering your date of birth. Their accuracy is not important. Even if you make a mistake, you can again change the date there and you can correct it. So show me the results faster is my, context there, right? So you're talking about two different metrics there. Now, what will be the matrix you will aim to achieve for this context that we are talking about here? Since the information is going to be used for legal purposes, accuracy is important. That's the first metric that we have. The other thing is, since there are a lot of information required, recognition and correlation is also important, and user should not be overwhelmed at all. These are the criteria you are setting. And that way you can frame your goal, right? Your key goal, which is user should be able to accurately input the information and complete the process without getting overwhelmed. So you are, writing it clearly so that when you, go and design your form, you are addressing to these metrics that are here. Always anchoring back to, okay, whether I'm achieving accuracy or not, right? Is it recognizable or not, right? It is overwhelming or it is simple for my users, right? So that is step 5. And I think you can do it even in step 1 too. But what we have done is we have first understood the overall ecosystem and then we are defining the matrix so that we understand, okay, how is that metric very, very important? Because we saw, okay, there were a lot of information and it is a very important, requirement that is there. So yes, you can do it in step 1 too, not a problem. The other step is plan appropriate form elements. So what are the different ways to collect data in a form? There are a lot, right? There is a huge spectrum through which you can take the data to, make a sense out of it, right? But on a larger level, if you look at the concept, there are two types, right? So type 1 is you are inputting the data, the other is you are selecting the data, you are making a choice, right? So whether you are inputting, just talking about the screen interfaces, you are talking about input text field, input text area, right? And there can be everything else, right? So voice input and everything, you are taking the input, right? The other is you are selecting. The definitive choices are there, right? In terms of drop down radio buttons. Okay, so if you want to select an image, right, or select a date and all those things. So like button is also a definitive data, right? It's not that you are having to input, just you choose. Do you want to like, otherwise don't like. So on an overall, there are two different types. So you either put the data or you select the data. So if we see, there are some pros and cons. So pros for data input, it is more intuitive. You don't have to think about the constraints. You can input whatever you want. So I want to buy a shoe. You are not having to think about any rule. And but the con is it's highly prone to errors because when you are trying to write, I want to buy shoes, you might miss on some spellings because you're a human being. You tend to make mistake and it's natural, right? On the other side, when you're selecting the data, the process, you can standardize choices, right? So for example, if I'm collecting the data from you and I'm saying, okay, tell me your let's say what degree did you pursue. Some people will write like, okay, I am bachelor's of engineering, but some people will only write BE. Two different two different kind of data for same kind of information. So that is the problem with data input. But data selection, you have the advantage. You can put the choices. Okay, select from these options below. But the learnability issues will also come because they'll need to learn those standards, right? They'll need to learn the choices that they need to make. We'll do an exercise. So choose the most appropriate form field to collect the information, right? So, okay. So if you are collecting gender, what will you choose? There are some other choices too. Yeah. I would say for different contexts, both apply, right? So if you are looking at accuracy, you will go with this guy in which you want to select the date. So you are making sure you are not making mistake. But the con is it's not fast, it's slow. You need to have, go through a lot of steps. But if you are looking at speed, okay, go ahead with this guy, right? Select date of birth from here. Awesome. So your profile picture. So whatever questions that we, answers that we discuss, all are applicable, right? So here drop down can also come if we are talking about, multiple choices, more than 5, right? And yes, all the choices are there. Also understand that choices should be limited, right? So when you are talking about degrees, they are limited. There are no unlimited kind of a degree. There can be BTech, BE, BBA, all those. There will be limited list, right? Here, the other constant also you need to think about is how many hobbies that can be there, right? So if you are putting checkboxes, it can go to 1,000. Yeah, so it's singular, right? But you can, I think, always use a combo box, right? In which you are combining a drop down and a input text field. So you can search for a hobby, and if the hobby is not there, you can add that hobby there in the list. That is the combination of selecting, inputting, and then select. So that would be a great exploration if you all do, which is combo box. That would be there. So we were also only talking about the month, right? We were not talking about anything else. So if we go back to the choices, we are just asking about the month. So why are we worrying about the days and the years? Choose a drop down. Step 7. So here is another question for all of you. What is the best way to show when an error happens and why? So the left or the right? You should be able to inform about the error as soon as it happens, rather than having to go through the submit button and then, okay, you made the mistake there, informing it that way, right? Now the other question, right? What is the best location for an error message? Left or right? So you should be able to inform where did that error happen, rather than having them to figure it out. So that is that, and always plan for errors, right? So what are the errors that can happen in email, zip code, wherever possible, right? So zip code, phone number, and everything. So that is the defensive design, right? Plan for all the errors and plan to prevent them from happening. So that is the step 7. And the final step is basically choosing the element for which you basically need to watch the day one. Day one is mandatory for everyone to watch day one of a design patterns workshop. I mean, we'll upload the recording in the canvas and you'll be able to access it. So you should be able to evaluate and choose a particular element for a task that you're trying to do, right? So for name, it's input field you are selecting, right? And also you need to plan for all the edge cases, right? So all these states.